We're ready to start. We are working on Parsha Lech Lecha, where it was requested since we just got back that we're going to discuss a little bit about Bereshis. So within the short time that we have, we'll just mention, I wanted to look on one thing related to that of Bereshis. So I was asked to speak about Chava, not knowing that it was specifically about Chava.
No, just Chava and Adam.
So it was Adam and Chava, but I understood it to be about Chava. So I just wanted to mention one idea related to this concept that we call Adam and Chava the archetypical human beings, that they represent all of humanity in the world of male and female. So I just wanted to present one aspect of that, of Adam and Chava. So the pasuk says when Chava was created, even though it was taken from the rib of Adam, the pasuk says, I think it's in chapter 2 over here. And Hashem caused a sleep to fall upon man. Vayishan, and he goes to sleep. Vayikach achas mitzalosav, and he takes one of his ribs. Vayiskor basar tachtena, and he goes ahead and he seals the flesh under him. Vayivan Hashem lakim asad tzela, and Hashem built this tzela, this rib. Asher lakach min Adam, that he took from man, leisha, to be a wife. Vayiviel Adam, and brought him over to man. So the concept over here is, the Medrash says originally that they were actually considered one, that Adam and Chava were considered one unit together, and then eventually it got split. In this case over here, from the simple reading of the verse, was that Hashem caused him to go to sleep. For whatever reason, Adam could not experience this by being awake. You realize this, if he's the first man, God could do anything. He could just say, give me a second, I'm taking a rib, and we'll move on. So there's a concept over here of sleep, where a person does not recognize what's going to happen in the essence of who they are, number one. Second thing is, he takes one of the ribs out, and vayizgor basar tachtena. He should not even recognize that the rib actually came from Adam. So it could have been that he could have left a little gaping hole or some type of scar, but he doesn't want to do that. Vayizgor basar tachtena. He goes and seals up the flesh under that. That's what seems to be saying. And we're just reading on the literal side. Vayiven Hashem lakim asad tzela, and Hashem goes and he takes this tzela, which we're defining as a rib, and he builds woman from that. Vayiviel Adam, and then brings woman closer over to man. So this concept over here that a piece of man is now missing, and is now from that is a creation called woman. But the concept is that it's vayivan, that she's actually built. So the Gemara says on this idea that there's a concept called bina, that the woman has something that's very different than that of a man, and the entire makeup of woman is so superiorly different in so many different ways than man, that it's intriguing to see how in many cases societies try to equate the two. And if you notice the differences that exist between man and woman in so many different ways, you would always wonder, how do they actually equate them? So when we talk about equality obviously means on different levels there's a certain element of equality, and in certain areas that there is no equality. We know, like when it comes to giving birth, there's no equality. Right? There's certain aspects that we can say are equal, and some things we can say are so totally different when it comes to the equality of men. So here it says, Vayivan Hashem lakim asad tzela. Hashem built this rib that he took from man, leisha, to become a woman, and then brought her over to man. At this moment, Adam says, Zosapam, at this moment, etzam etzmai, a bone from my bones, ubasar mibsari, and flesh from my flesh, l'zosikara isha, to this he will call her woman, ki meish lukacha zos, because she came from man. Which means the connection of woman to man is the concept that they are meant to be together, because they are coming from the original part. And so therefore we can understand equality in a better level over here, because we see that man and woman have a deeper connection. When Adam names her, he says, I realize that this is one and the same, that one comes from the other. And so it's not simply that when we talk about equality, we talk about relationships between man and woman, it's not just simply like, oh, it's a fit. No, it's a perfect fit because they come one from the other. So there's a concept that I want to present over here, the concept of what we call tznius and bina. Bina is from the verse over here that Hashem built her. Vayiven means to build, but it also means Bina is a deeper sense of understanding. When you build something, building something doesn't just simply mean taking a couple of things and putting it together. When you build something, you take raw material, different parts, and now you create a structure that's beyond what you could have had before, something that's entirely different. So this is the concept, what we know of Bina. When we deal with the concept of Bina, Bina has a deeper understanding of knowledge that is put together. When we refer to that of a woman generally has a concept called Bina Yisera, an extra dimension of understanding, that she understands things on a deeper level than man could possibly understand them. Which means that the concept of Bina means to be able to take different aspects of different ideals and put them all together into one large picture, into one building, which we'll call Bina. To be bone is something, which means a woman can understand from her intellect, from her senses around her, and from her intuition of the things that happen around, and be able to create a picture with that. So that's what it means, vayivne. To be able to build means take all the raw material and come to conclusions and come to realities that a man could not possibly be able to do. Sometimes there are some people, some men that would have this level of Bina, but in general, all females have this concept of Bina Yisera, this ability to be able to bring things together and have a much more natural understanding of how things actually work within humanity and things that follow within the world. This is the concept called Bina Yisera, and that is coming from this verse over here of binyan, to be able to build. There's another concept that is presented, and that is the concept of what we know as tzniut. Tzniut is something we call modesty. Modesty is something very different than what we truly understand modesty to be. The world of modesty, number one, we tend to think it's only related to clothing. But modesty is related to a general composure of how a person actually works. So when we refer to the concept of tznius in the spiritual fashion of who Chava is and what she represents, this idea of tznius, of modesty, takes on a totally different understanding than simply dress. So to quote from some of the commentaries, it's the ability to de-emphasize the superficial aspects of a person or a situation. What that means is that when we refer to tznius, the opposite of tznius is something that where someone basically looks at something superficially and materialistically. When a person is tsanua, they're looking beyond that. They're not emphasizing that aspect of the physicality of things. Rather, it's much deeper. It's tsanua. They're walking in a state of modesty in order to focus on the inner essence. So when we refer to the concept of tznius in woman, which represents this idea of modesty, it's well beyond modesty, and it's something that women have a much more powerful ability to comprehend and to connect to, but basically it's looking much deeper into things. This relates to the idea of Bina as well. Again, this concept of woman has this concept of Bina, of understanding, being able to see beyond the simple things that exist, and Tznius is the concept of being able to focus on those inner things more than focus on the superficial things. So women have a greater capacity for tznius than men, and a greater capacity for bina. Capacity doesn't mean that they can dress more modestly. It means the whole concept of what tznius actually means, which means the ability to focus on the deeper inner essence of what things are all about. That is what woman has a certain capability of understanding. So therefore, that's what it means over here, that when the verse says by Adam that it closed up the flesh, the Medrash says that when God built woman, He covered each limb with this extra tznius dimension. So it wasn't just simply this bina, this deeper understanding of being able to bring things together and marry them into one piece to have a deeper understanding, but within woman came this new concept called tznius as well, which is the ability to have total focus and see much deeper into things than that man would be able to do it. So therefore, this is the same concept where a woman can focus deeply on themselves, on nurturing of children and of spiritual emotions, much more focused than that a man would be able to do. And therefore, these are two distinct aspects that relate to women. We're learning from the pasuk of how Chav is actually built within the world. That the idea of bina and tzniut go hand in hand. They actually relate to this idea of being able to see much deeper into the world and connect people to much deeper depth of what it actually exists. So that is just a concept that I wanted to share within the understanding of Chava, and particularly in last week's Parsha. I know there's so much more you don't want me to share, but we're not going to do that right now. but there are fascinating concepts here that really relate to the role of women and the power that they actually bring on a much deeper level. Even though we grow up in societies which are, we'll call it man-focused, but the women have much more serious depth and are able to nurture in a much deeper way. We're now going to head back to our parsha, and that is Lech Lecha. So we missed a few thousand years already, basically, right? You had 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and now 10 generations from Noah to Abram. Generations took a long time, a couple of hundred years for every generation. So we just blew past in 2 weeks. So we're already like whatever year we're in right now. We've basically gone to about 2,000 years. So we're entering into Lech Lecha, and I really wanted to focus on 3 ideas this evening. Fascinating concepts that we have in Lech Lecha, but 3 ideas. I'm going to read the sidebar of the art scroll just so we get a quick synopsis of the parsha. And we're not going to get through very much tonight, but I want to read you the sidebar. So basically, Lech Lecha begins with Hashem calling out to Abram, telling him, I want you to leave from your land, from where you were born. You're going to go to this land that I'm going to show you. He comes to Canaan, and he says, I'm going to give your children this land. Your offspring is going to have this land. Fine. Abram and Sarai enter into Egypt, and Abram's concerned that they might want to kill him and take Sarah, so we're going to use this ploy that Sarah is Abram's sister. They are quasi-related anyway. Paro takes Sarah. Paro is afflicted and sends them off. And they escorted her wife, and they escorted them off after Paro is afflicted, and they're on their merry way. They go back to Eretz Yisrael. Abraham is with Lot. Lot is nephew. Lot is not up to no good. He's actually doing things in a way that's somewhat either trickery or stealing. And Abram says, it doesn't matter. No matter. I know we're brothers, but this relationship isn't working out. All right, we see over here that as related as they may be, the relationship cannot survive together with the two of them together, because Abram's morality and his moral compass is different than that of Lot, so therefore they have to shift. We'll try to see if we can add a piece on that as well. Hashem then gives the promise over to Abram again, and somehow Lot is taken captive. But prior to this, there's a war with kings, and this war is bizarre. It's a bizarre war. There's a war of kings, 4 kings on 5 kings. Sodom is defeated. Lot is taken captive, and then Abram somehow, against this massive war, he brings a few of his people. Medrash says it's Elazar, just he and one other individual, and they wipe everybody out, and they save Lot. At that point, the king of Sodom, who was now saved, comes out to offer a trade with Abram. He doesn't want any of it. Malki Tzedek, king of Shalem, comes out, and he gives him gifts, and they move on. God then continues the promise in a vision, and he says, you're going to have great reward, even though you got this entire war done, and all the other nations think you're the greatest thing in the world, and they want to crown you as prince, but still I'm going to give you a child. Okay, then he has the famous covenant of the parts, where he has to cut these animals up in half, fire comes through, and tells them about the land of Israel. There's going to be exile the Jewish people are going to go throughout their lives, but there'll still be a covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people. And suddenly we enter into this story of Hagar and Yishmael, where Sarah now elevates Hagar to an elevated status in order to be able to have a child. Hagar gets pregnant. She mistreats Sarah. Sarah kicks her out. An angel appears to her and says, you're going to become a great nation. She goes back to live with Sarah. And then Hashem changed the name of Abram and Sarah to now Avraham and Sarah, from Abram and Sarai. And now there's Bris Milah. So Abram and Yishmael, the son of Hagar, now have a Bris Milah. And Sarah is now given a promise that she's going to have a child. And at the end of the parsha ends off with the story of the circumcision, the Bris Milah. That is your synopsis. Thank you to the Art School for those sidebars. So what we want to look at tonight is 3 things. Potentially 4. So one of them I want to look at is this idea of Lech Lecha. That Hashem tells Abraham, I want you to go. Lech Lecha me'artzecha, go from your land, u'meladecha, from your birthplace, u'mibeis avicha. We spoke about this in a different class, and that is that sometimes it's difficult for an individual to really appreciate the things that they have in their lives. And sometimes we appreciate those things when we don't have them anymore. Sometimes we appreciate those things when you just have to continue to focus and think about those things that you had. So what we explained in the other class was that there is a concept over here that when Hashem tells him each one of these places, your birthplace, the place of your father, where you grew up, everything about it, I want you to have that appreciation for everything that you lived with. So imagine you're moving, when a person's moving from the house that they lived in when they grew up, they want to have that appreciation. They'll go to each room and look at each one of the things. Oh, I remember this room where the ball went through the window. I remember this room where we sat and laughed, by the kitchen table. That you have that appreciation. So at this moment, Hashem wants Abram to have that appreciation from where he came from, and yet still to be able to go on his merry way. El ha'aretz asher, to the land that I'm going to show you. He doesn't actually tell him where that is. And the Chasam Sofer suggests on this idea. He says that we know this is considered one of Avram's great tests. Yet Hashem does not show him where he's going to go. And what was this test? He says, I'm going to show you. So what Abram is thinking, says the Chasam Sofer, is, you know what? Hashem says you have to leave. So we know that it's uneasy for me to leave a place. A person says, a person has to quit a job or they have to move out of the house, they can sell it, but where are they going to go? If they have no idea where they're going to go, what's going to happen? So the test for Abraham was not simply that he's going to leave a place, but that he has no idea where he's going to go. He has no idea where the future lies in front of him. And therefore he says that Abraham's thought at this moment was, you know what? Hashem realizes that I'm unique. I'm different than everybody else, so he's going to bring me to a land, and this land's going to be desolate. And I'm not going to get into fights with anybody. I'm just going to start my own religion over here. I'm just going to be able to start from scratch and be able to bring people closer, because that's what I love to do. And things are going to be great. Yet he says over here, he's happy with that. And I'll be like, I'll be able to start things anew. But now then Hashem then tells him, guess what? I'm no longer going to be bringing you into this land that you don't know about, that nobody lives in. I'm actually going to bring you into a well-inhabited land. A well-inhabited land that other people are going to vie for. And now you're going to be like a ger. Now you're going to be like you haven't found your place again. Even though I'm telling you to leave one place, I'm going to send you to a place and you're going to be like a visitor again. And therefore, he says that Abram understands at this point, you know what? Vayiven sham mizbeach. Abraham builds an altar and he gives a sacrifice to Hashem. And he says, you know what? I have my goals. I have my ideals of what I think is the best thing for me. But clearly Hashem has better ideas in mind. And so this is the message that one of the tests for Abraham is that even though he thought that Hashem was taking him to a place to start something new, it's going to be great things. Can you imagine this if, let's say, it usually happens this way, a husband says, to the wife, I'm going to take you on a great trip. And she's like, I've been waiting to go to this winery or to this, boat ride or to this place of serenity. And he brings her to like Magic Mountain, to the haunted house. And she's like, honey, this is it. It's like, isn't this great? Don't you want to go here? I've been waiting the whole time to go here. Right? And for Abraham, it's a similar story, except the difference is that no matter what's going to happen, he knows that it's going to be perfect. Whatever Hashem's going to tell him, it's going to be perfect. So it says the Chasam Sofer, Lo Hirhur. He does not have any other external thoughts. V'even Sham Mizbeach, and he builds an altar, and he says, you know what? I'm thankful to Hashem. No matter where I'm going to go, I'm going to be thankful. So that's our first step in understanding what Abram is all about, because this is our basic introduction to him. The basic introduction that we have to Abram is that when we're going to go through our tribulations in life, no matter what, it's to be thankful at any point. We have our goals of what we hope is going to happen, what Hashem is going to do for us, and then sometimes he takes plan B or C or D. At that moment, we can still build our own altar and be thankful to Hashem and say, you know what? Obviously, this is part of the plan. I have to be able to be thankful for it. So this is our first introduction that we see to Abraham, is that we're taking him out of his land to a place of unknown, and yet he's still able to accept it with tremendous levels of simcha. So that's one. Second thing is, it's actually 2b over here. When Abraham meets with Lot, Abram meets with Lot. They're trying to build lives together or separately, but near each other. And Abram realizes that this is not going to work. They have to part ways. So he says, Abram had a lot of animals, livestock, silver, gold, and he went to this particular place. Lot also had it, and the land could not support them dwelling together because their possessions were abundant. They were unable to dwell together. Okay, why not? It's big land over here. There was quarreling between the herdsmen. The Kli Yakar has a comment later on in a few parshas from this week, and he points out the idea that when people are happy together and they're friendly together, it doesn't matter how tight the living quarters are, they can have a great time. You can have a family of 15, 20 kids, and they can live in a two-bedroom apartment as long as they're getting along. But take a family of 2 kids or 3 kids, and they can have a mansion of 8,000 square feet, and they still can't live together in the same house. I don't know if you remember this news story. It was a pretty embarrassing news story that happened, must have been about 7, 8 years ago. The New York Times had the news story where this this Jewish couple was on the verge of getting divorced, but they were fighting over their house. So it was on the cover of like the home section of the New York Times, and they show a picture of the inside of the house where there's tape or paint going across the middle of the whole house. Like up the stairwell, there's like paint, and down the kitchen there's paint, and like one sink gets this, one sink gets that, and it was just like an embarrassing Chil Hashem. Like they're showing that this is a Jewish couple and this is what they're going through. Right? So if you hate each other, there's not enough room in the world for the two of you. And when you love each other, it doesn't matter how much lack of space there is, there's always room. Abram and Lot, it's not going to work out. They're unable to dwell together. There's quarreling that's happening over here. So Abram says, let there not be any strife. You know what? You go your way, I'll go my way. And if you're not going to move, I'm moving. Either way. Because Abram realized that in order to create shalom, and in order to create peace, sometimes the only way you can create peace is by going into pieces, separate ways, right? That's the best way to be able to create peace. Sometimes it's just not going to happen to have shalom in the way that we always want it, where there's that element of love. The Maral explains that, he quotes a pasuk in Mishnah I don't have in front of me, but the Maral explains that when it comes to friendships, and when it comes to deep relationships, you might think the deepest relationship is that with a relative. But says, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon says in Mishlei, that's actually not true. The friendships that you have with friends are deeper than the relationships that you're going to have with your siblings. Of course, we'd love for the siblings to be friends as well, but the friendships are something that are built externally. You build a friendship with somebody else, whereas a relationship with a sibling or a relative is something that was natural. And says the Maharal, there's going to be times when your deepest relationship are going to be with friends and not actually going to be with relatives. And that's something to recognize, that the friendships that we have with relatives, we must keep those strong at all times. Because even if they get broken, somebody can rebuild them. But oftentimes, with family, the only reason why you're friends is because you're related. How many people know that they have family members that they're like, if we weren't related, I'd never see you in this world, right? But says the Maharal, this is the concept that we have over here. So here you have an example with Abram and Lot, where even though they're related, the friendship is not going to last. Abram is going to separate. In order for them to actually stay together, quote unquote, they have to actually be separated. So what happens at this point, and I want to share with you, and this is going to be the main 2 points that I want to share. Something that was brand new to me, and it always bothered me, the story in the Parsha. There's a story of kings. I never understood the story of kings, because what do we always focus on? We focus on Lech Lecha, we focus on Abram, you got to leave. Focus on, we're going to give you this promises. There's going to be a promise at the end. Then you got the fantastic story of Sarah and Hagar and the like. But somehow we're thrown into the story of these kings, these 4 kings and the 5 kings. And then Abram goes and saves Lot. The whole story seems bizarre. And what's it actually doing over here? So we're going to look at this story over here with the kings. It happened in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arloch of Elasar, Kedar Laomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. That's the name of the towns. They made a war on these other kings. Bera, king of Sdom, Birsha, king of Amora, Shinav, king of Adma, Shem Aver, king of Tzevoim, and the king of Bela, which is Tzoar. All of them joined the valley, now of the Salt Sea, Yam HaMelech, fine. 12 years they served this king, Kedar Laomer, and they rebelled for 13 years. And in the 14th year, Kedar Laomer and the kings who were with him came and struck their farm in all these different places, and all these different more places, and then they turned back and came to Mishpat, all these places, and they started just wiping people out. And the king of Sodom went forth to the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, and all these other 4 kings, and they engaged him in the battle. And what happened? The verse says over here, the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen wells. Anyone know what bitumen wells are? Good. The king of Sodom and Amorah fled and fell into them, while the rest fled to a mountain. They seized all the wealth of Sodom and Amorah and all their food, and they departed, and they captured Lot and his possessions, Abram's nephew, and they left, and he was residing in Sodom. Okay, then someone tells Abram that this is what happens, and he goes on to this fight, and he goes and saves everybody. Okay, and we'll go on to the first part. So the first thing is, what is going on here? Like, do I really need this as part of a story? Like, this is not really an intrinsic story that I have really for the building of the Jewish people or the world, for that matter. Lot's going to be saved. Okay, it was a great heroic effort. It sounds like a Rambo movie, and we'll move on. Like, I don't really need the rest of it. So what is this story over here? So I just want to share with you a thought from Rabbi Abram Gordimer that explains the following idea. He explains, and this is the first part. After Abram goes and he expels all these other kings, he saves Sodom. So he didn't just rescue Lot. That wasn't it was his goal to rescue Lot, but he basically wiped everybody out. He just took everybody out in this rampage over here. He not only saved his nephew Lot, but what he did was he just showed the world, you know who's boss over here? There's a new king in town. Again, 4 kings against 5 kings. They're defeated, and now one guy comes in and takes over the land over here. So he says, number 1, he was instantly propelled to a position of unimaginable might and prestige. And overnight he became this power player, superstar, strong force in Canaan. Everyone's like, where'd this guy come from? Unbelievable. He hasn't shared a word of this, that this is God doing any of this. We don't even really see it here yet. At this point, if you're Abram and you're thinking, what have I been doing my whole life? Well, my whole life I've been recognizing God. And now I've been sharing with the world what God is all about. You just made me king of massive nations over here. I'm now going to spread godliness to everybody. This is going to be amazing. The biggest Kiruv Center is about to take force. I'm now going to show the world what it means to serve God. That you would think that he would now be propelled to the Kiruv king. And that anyone that's trying to do outreach on people and show them what the world is all about, this is the opportune time that's going to happen. This is the time it's going to happen. What happens after the whole story over here? Abram says, it's okay, I don't need anything from you. Stone, I can go on my merry way. After these events, the word of Hashem came to Abram and said, don't worry, Abram, I'm a shield for you. Your reward is great. And he said to me, I'm childless. What am I going to do? Are you going to inherit me? Is my inheritance going to go to my servant Eliezer? So Hashem says, no, he's not going to inherit. Somebody else is going to inherit. So which means this battle of 4 and 5 kings leads to something new. What does it actually lead to? It leads to now the new promise that you're going to have a child. This is what I need to have a child. I got to fight to save my nephew and knock out entire nations in order to have a child. So what is the connection over here? So he says as follows. Abram could have easily been a leader of nations now. He could have easily taken over and shown people what it means to be a godly individual. But what does he say? The pasuk says immediately after the war, Hashem says to Abram, don't fear, because I'm going to protect you. Your reward is very great. So if you were Abram, you'd say, okay, Hashem, what's the deal? When do we start? Do I have to do any fundraising? Am I going to be able to, start teaching Torah and start teaching the world what it's all about? Is that what it's going to be? What does he say? But you didn't give me any children. Children, come on, I just gave you this great opportunity. So he says, rather than be happy with his newfound position of ultimate prestige and power to be able to convince the people to do Hashem's will, he suddenly changed the direction of discussion and he says, but can I have a child? What does he need a child for? Wasn't he content with his achievements of being able to now change the world? You're going to change thousands of people below you to do immeasurable things within the world. You're going to change the entire trajectory of the world. Everyone's going to say, wow, it all came from Avram. Before we were worshipping idols. We were not seeing the hand of God, and now we see it all. And yet Avram says that wasn't enough. So basically, what he explains is that at this moment, Avram could have easily said, I'll take this this prestige, I'll take this power to be able to influence the world, but he wants something else. And this was overcoming the challenge. What was the challenge that Hashem presented before him? Basically, the challenge was that he had it made. But there was nothing more he really needed to do. People would feed out of his hand. He could now convince the world to walk in God's ways. They can feed out of his hand. Sarah, what would she have to do? Nothing. This is great. People are going to be knocking on my door so that I can be able to teach them what life is all about. But Abram understood that as great as that is, that cannot be my true destiny. Okay? Why can that not be the true destiny? Because he realizes that all these nations that he battled against and all the nations that are surrounding him, they themselves are morally corrupt. As much as he can go ahead and convince a person to change their ways and to improve their lives, but the basis of who they are morally corrupt. And therefore he realized what his destiny is not to convince people to be a little bit better, but he's to create a nation that's going to be pure from the beginning. So even though he could have had it all, he could have changed the people around him, but he came to this amazing realization of, I can have this position of power and clout, or actually I can start from a place of purity and bring holiness into the world from a state of purity. And that is what he realizes his choice now. And so the story of the 4 and 5 kings are interjected here. See a purity over here, right? The story of it's waving to me, right? He's like, that's me, purity, right? The story of 4 and 5 kings over here are presenting this unbelievable experience over here. Abram could have easily taken the new job. That was the goal. Hashem says, I'm throwing this. You know what the test is? And not just simply, are you willing to save your nephew Lot? The test is, after you save your nephew Lot, what are you going to do with that? Are you now going to take this job, which is a good job? It's a great job to be able to change the world in a nice way and help people improve themselves. But that itself was a test. And that test was, is that enough for you? Or is there a greater destiny available for you? That was a test that Hashem was testing Abram right now. And therefore he had to basically fight against this to be able to say, you know what, I have to build a new legacy, and that legacy is going to be a legacy that comes from purity into a genuine spiritual force that is more powerful than just simply helping those that are corrupt become a little bit less corrupt, and basically create a force that's entirely devoted to God. That's a pretty powerful test. How many of us would be able to face a test like that? Because really, both sound pretty great. Both sound pretty amazing. I can change the world over here. I'm going to lead an organization and convince people to not be as corrupt as they were, but it won't be coming from a state of purity. But Avram realizes, no, in order to really create a nation, it has to come from the pure state of spirituality and from holiness, and that's where he realizes that he needs to ask for a son for this. Pretty remarkable idea over here. The other thing would have been great as well. That is considered a test unto itself. This is why it's so important for us to realize how powerful going towards purest intentions and purest goals are really all about. It's not just simply, I did it was a good idea, but having it from the greatest state of purity, that's when real things last, and that's where things actually blossom. So it's a beautiful concept over here. So that is one of the ideas as to why he had to have the story of the kings. Now we'll go to the second aspect of this idea of kings, something I saw again this year to be able to understand this a little bit better. So here's a story. Walk through the story with me. Sodom is defeated, and the verses say over here, something you skip over. It says, "Ve'emek hasidim be'eros be'eros chemar." The valley of Sidim is full of pits, and these pits have chemar in it, some type of mud, some type of soot or whatever it is, some hard thing that's difficult to get out of. And Sodom and Amorah fall into these pits. This is what it is. They fall into these pits. It's like, did I even read these psukim before? I don't remember reading these. They fall into these pits, and everyone else fled to the mountain. They fly to the mountain, and Sodom and Amorah are taken. All their food and wealth is totally taken out of them, and Lot is taken captive. Okay, Abram saves them, And now what happens is, it says as follows: the king of Sodom. I'm going to ask you the question, and you're going to give me the answer. The king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from defeating Kedar Omer and the kings that were with him in the valley of Shaveh, which is a king's valley. Malki Tzedek, the king of Shalem, comes out and brings him bread and wine, and he is a Kohen Gadol. Somehow he's a great priest, the priest of God and the Most High. He blesses him. The king of Malki Tzedek blesses him and says, "Blessed is Abram of God, the Most High, Maker of heaven and earth," which is in Hebrew it is over here, and he says, "Baruch Abram lekel elyon konei shamayim v'aretz, uvaruch kel elyon asher megein tzarech b'yadach v'yitein lo ma'aser mikol." And he says, and he blessed God as the Most High, deliver your foes into your hands, and he gave him a tenth of everything. The concept of giving your tenth, your tithes. And the king of Sodom then says to Abram, "Give me the people and take the possessions for yourself." And Abram says, "No, can do. I'm not going to do it. I don't want anything of it. I'm not taking anything from you because I don't want you to say that the king of Sodom made Abram rich. Only what these young men have eaten, give them that, and I need nothing else." That's the story. What is the big question on the story? There's a story of a king of Sodom, and he comes out, and somehow this king, Malki Tzedek, comes and gives him bread and wine, and Abram takes it. And then the king of Sodom says, "You know what, I'll make a barter with you. I'll trade with you the money for the slaves." And Abram says, "No thanks. I don't need it." What's the story over here? So the question that's asked is, if you didn't notice the nuance, like I never noticed the nuance in any of the years of reading this, it says very simply, the king of Sodom went out to meet him after Abram defeated everybody. Malki Tzedek, king of Shalem, which we call Salem, right? In English they call it Salem over here. Right? We know that a lot of America is actually named after Jewish places. So we have Salem. What else do we have? We have Zion. Any other place that we know of that we're familiar with? Bethlehem. There's a Bethlehem over here, right? There's also Bethlehem. What else? There's a number of other places that we have that are actually...
Hebron.
What?
There is Hebron.
There's a Hebron here?
Yeah,
the gas station.
No,
the gas station.
There's a Hebron in Texas, I think. Like there is a few Hebrons.
Could be, yeah. So it
is.
seems that when I was listening to a shir in this, that when the original founding fathers actually started with America, they understood that they were the new Jews, that they took over as the Jewish people, and they felt that the way that they came to it was similar to the way the Jews actually came to the splitting of the sea and were going into the land of Israel. And so they named a lot of their children and the places they have based on the biblical places that we have as well. So here, Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem, Rashi quotes from Medrash that Malki Tzedek is actually Shem, one of Adam's three sons.
No.
I'm sorry, Noah's sons. He's Shem himself. And Melech Shalem, the king of Shalem, is that it's the king of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim. Same idea. So, Sodom comes out, and he wants to talk to Abram, and suddenly, Malki Tzedek comes and says, "How about some bread and wine? Why don't I give you this? This is fantastic. I love it. This is great." And he blesses him, and he gives him his tithes, and then the king of Sodom says, "Anyway, that was bizarre. Where did he just come from? I was in the middle of talking to you, Abraham. How about we make a deal? How about I trade you the money for the slaves?" And Abraham says, "No, thanks. I don't want to touch anything from you." "Well, you just took from the other guy. Well, he just walked in front of me. Why'd you take from him? You're not taking from me." So this is the question. What is the story over here? Sodom comes out. Malki Tzedek interrupts. And then Sodom comes again. And then Abram basically shuts him down and says, "I want nothing to do with you." So what happens over here? So Rashi tells us the following. Rashi says, what happened to Sodom? The interesting thing that happened to Sodom, says Rashi, that he and Amorah, he and the other king, they fell into these pits of tar. They fell into these tar pits. The Medrash says, Shahaya Titmug Balbahem, that when they fell into these pits of tar, a miracle happened to the king of Sodom, and he was able to get out of these tar pits. Why? Because there were a number of nations that did not believe that Abram was actually saved from this fiery furnace that Nimrod had thrown him into. For those that are not familiar, Abram was thrown into a fiery furnace and he survived. There are a number of nations, says Rashi, that did not believe that Abram actually survived this entire ordeal. And now, when Sodom came out, now they said, wow, I can't believe he was saved. I'm sure Abraham was saved as well. Unbelievable. Right? So, what happened to Sodom? Sodom was actually in a pit of, I guess, burning tar. And somehow he's able to get himself out of this pit. He's miraculously saved. And because of his salvation, now people are going to say, now I realize who Abram is. He was actually saved from a fiery furnace as well. Okay, so that's the first thing we know about Sodom. So Rav Yochanan Levavitz points out over here that when a person has a lack of belief in something, the reason why they have this tremendous lack of belief is because they don't even see it that it's potentially possible for it to happen. Which means, if someone told you that someone was deathly ill and there was no hope for them to be cured, you would never believe it if they told you they would be cured, because it's not possible. But if you know that other people are cured from certain things, you can see it potentially possible that this person can also be cured from this disease as well. So he says, when it comes to a lack of emunah, a lack of belief, every one of us has a lack of belief in certain things. The reason why we have this lack of belief is because it's not in our comprehension that something like this could potentially happen. So Rav Yerucham asks the question, he says, so what? I get it that Abram was saved from a fiery furnace. Nobody believes him. Now the king of Sodom is saved, and now they're going to believe that Abram was saved from a fiery furnace. What does one do with the other? Why? If you don't believe, you don't believe. He's going to come out, guys, you're not going to believe what happened. I was in these tar pits. I got saved. It was unbelievable. Yeah, I don't believe you either. No. So what he explains is as follows. Whenever a person has a lack of emunah, it's because of the fact that he cannot fathom that this thing could potentially exist. So he says, if something's obvious and something's real, even though I've never seen with my own eyes, I can potentially imagine it happens. Imagine, for example, a person's going to come to you and he's going to tell you about something that happens in Paris. You've never been to Paris, and you don't know the streets of Paris, and you don't even know the guy who's telling you about Paris. You've never met him before, but you can believe those things because of the fact that you understand what streets of Paris are like. You understand there's a place of Paris, and you can understand the concept to go on. So if I can relate to these things, then I can believe a little bit better. So the story that happened with Sodom was that Avraham, people cannot relate to Avram. He's in a lofty area. They tell me about this thing. It's not humanly possible. But if someone like the king of Sodom has this event happen, then now he's sharing it, now other people will actually be able to believe as well. So what Rabbi Yerucham tells us over here is that when it comes to miracles, miracles actually happen on a regular basis. The only problem is that we're not accustomed to seeing miracles because we're not attuned to them. We will not believe them when they actually happen. But the more we accustom ourselves to these miracles, the more we're actually going to see how these miracles occur. And the more it becomes a natural experience for us that we can see more miracles happen within our lives. And so Hashem needed to show this to Sodom so that other people could recognize what actually happens to Avram. And now we go to the final part and just really being able to understand this concept of Malki Tzedek. So Rav Gordimer explains the following idea. Avram does not want to take any gifts from Sodom. Why not? He just took a gift from Malki Tzedek. So he says as follows. Because of the fact that Sodom just had this miraculous experience, he was saved from these tar pits, and he got out alive, you would think at this moment, Sodom would now go and recognize that God is the master of the world, and that God is in control of everything. So he says this is where the unusual flow of events happen. You never heard the story of this. I don't think you ever did. At least I never heard the story this way. And he says as follows. He says, Avraham and Malki Tzedek were well aware of who Sodom was and his evil reputation. They knew he was not a proper king. And he suggests the following, that Avraham and Malki Tzedek had a scheme to turn things around. Here's a king who was he lost everything, fell into a tar pit, miraculously saved. Now we have the opportunity to turn him around, and maybe he'll recognize God and say, I'm going to change my ways. Maybe you think miracles happen to people, you think they change their ways. So listen to these words. He says like this. Perhaps we can influence him so that he can recognize God's hand. So what do? The king of Sodom approaches Avram and he says he's about to make a deal. At that moment, they choreograph this entire episode, or maybe not choreograph, but at least this is how it's happening. Sodom comes forward, boom, right away, Malki Tzedek walks on the scene, and he says, Avram, I want to give you bread and wine. I'm so thankful. You know why? The God, King of Kings, right? The whatever the terminology used, that Baruch Kel Elyon Konei Shamayim V'Aretz, God of Master of the world, who owns everything. He say, I'm so excited for what happened over here. Let me give you this food. By coming forth in front of the presence of the king of Sodom, what Malki Tzedek's goal was to praise God. So Sodom would be able to recognize, you know what? It really was God. God's hand was in charge of everything over here. And now, what's going to happen? Hopefully, Sodom is going to change his ways. So Malki Tzedek comes in order to show Sodom how to reframe your mind and realize what the purpose of life is about and what godliness is really all about. So he wants to give an example to Sodom to see this is how you're going to live your life. What happens? The king of Sodom basically neglects that entire event. And what does he do? He goes over to him and says, listen, let's make a deal. I give you money, you give me slaves, and things will be great. Things will be great. We'll move on. We'll make a great barter over here. This could have been the moment where the king of Sodom says, you know what? Wait a minute. There's so much more than just simply monetary possessions and everything else. There's godliness within the world. But he doesn't do that. What does he do? He only goes to the physical desires that he wants, and he doesn't even listen to anything Malki Tzedek does. It's at that moment Abraham retorts, and Abram basically says, I'm going to let you have it. Sodom, I'm going to let you have it. What am I going to let you have? You define God. You were just saved miraculously. Forget about the fact that I just went through a miracle and I saved everybody. You were saved from these tar pits, and you did nothing about it to recognize God's hand, God's might in any of this. And therefore, Abram used the same terminology that Malki Tzedek uses. He says, Baruch Kel Konei Shamayim V'Aretz. He says, from the exalted God, master of heaven and earth, I am not going to take anything from you. Why? You just took from him. The whole goal of this was for you to recognize God, but you still didn't recognize God. I don't want anything to do with you because you're so hardened and you don't even see what the purpose of what life is all about. For sure, I want nothing to do with you. So Avram's goal here was not protecting himself, at least suggested over here by Rabbi Gordimer. It wasn't necessarily that he's doing it for himself, but rather, what is his goal? To teach him a lesson, that if you're not going to see the hand of God in your life, then I want nothing to do with you. And similarly, this is what basically we have with Lot somewhat. But basically, he was giving rebuke over to the king of Sodom. If you're not going to attribute your salvation to Hashem, then I don't want to have anything to do with you. I don't even want to take a shoelace from you because it has no value to me whatsoever if you're not going to see that focus towards Hashem. So what we see over here is that the story of the 4 kings and 5 kings, number 1 is a test for Abram of greatness, and to see that he can start from a state of purity. And number 2, that in this entire sequence of events that happens with Malki Tzedek and with the king of Sodom, we see what's really happening over here is a bigger story. The bigger story is that Malki Tzedek and Abram are trying their best to try to convince someone how to see the hand of God in life. But sometimes there's some people that they'll never see the hands of God in their lives, and there's nothing you can do. With those people, you say, very nice. It's a wonderful experience, but I don't need anything from you because my whole goal of everything is really for the sake of God. And if me giving you stuff is going to cause less godliness within the world, then there's no purpose. So therefore, Abram was giving him musar and giving him rebuke to teach him that whatever happens in your life, find the way that you see Hashem's hand. See that God is controlling everything that exists within your life all the time. We'll stop over here.